Welcome to For the Church, a podcast for the flock of Zion Presbyterian Church in Columbia, Tennessee. We want to help you think biblically about everyday matters. Zion Church exists to join Jesus in his mission to reach people with the gospel and then to equip his people to worship and serve. I'm your host, Keaton Paul, and joining me is my regular conversation partner and co-host, Seth Scruggs. And also joining us today is our special guest, Meagen Anderson. In this season, we are talking about movies. It's summertime, so we're gonna talk about a variety of global hits and phenomenons. And so, as we sit here now, all of us decked head to toe in flamboyant pink, we're gonna talk about Barbie. But before we do that, hey Seth, how are you?
For the record, I am dressed head to toe in black. As I do every day of my life.
That's your boycott. You're boycotting Barbie by not wearing pink.
I came as Oppenheimer.
Okay, fair enough. That's fair. So we have a special guest today.
We do.
Why should we have a special guest for us to talk about Barbie?
Well, there were two reasons for that. The first is that it felt really weird to have two dudes just sitting in a room talking about Barbie.
That's right.
So I wanted
Feels
to have
like an
woman.
SNL skit, actually.
But also, Meagen has a master's degree in film, and from FSU, which is like one of the premier film schools in the country.
Yeah.
So kind of an important thing.
Kind of a big deal.
Give us a little bit of an introduction to you, Meagen, for people who don't know you.
Hello, I'm Meagen. I have, my MFA is from Florida State. I got that in 2015, and it is specifically in major motion picture film production. So it's not a film studies degree. We actually didn't do a whole lot of theory. I had to do a lot of that on my own. It is the learning the start to finish process from concept to distribution and everything in between. So it's more of a technical degree, actually.
Yeah, for people who don't know, there are kind of two classes of film degrees that you can get. One is film studies. That's a very theoretical, like when you think of like dudes smoking pipes and talking about The Godfather and like all these things like that.
Which is in Barbie.
Which is in Barbie. That's a very like film studies, like what does this shot mean and that kind of thing. Whereas film production, which is what my degree is in as well, is more on the side of like, okay, how do you rig a light? How do you rig a camera? How do you, run wireless video? Like all of these kinds of things that are a little bit more technical. Though screenwriting is part of that. So there is story in there. Story is very, very important.
We did a bunch of above the line work, which is there's above the line and below the line. You guys can do that research on your own. There's pay grade involved in that. But basically above the line is a lot of the concept and producing, screenwriting, directing. The people who are in charge, their department heads are above the line. So we started with that, and then we went into below the line crewing and stuff. So we were supposed to know everything by the end of it.
Yep.
That's always fun. Know everything.
Yeah.
That's all we want. We just want you to know everything.
So this is one of the few times in my life where because I have a degree in film production and biblical studies, it's one of the few times where I am sitting with two people who outrank me in both of those categories. So this is really fun for me. I'm really excited.
I don't know if I outrank you.
Well, you have an MFA and I don't. So we'll start there. So today we're talking about Barbie. I'll give the synopsis just like I did for the last one. Barbie lives in a perfect world where every day is the best day ever, but when she starts to develop problems like irrepressible thoughts of death and cellulite, she learns that she must travel to the real world to find who is playing with her and causing her to feel this way. And upon returning to Barbie Land, she discovers that Ken has turned Barbie Land into a patriarchy, and she and her human friends must save Barbie Land and discover what it means to be a woman. It is this movie was directed by Greta Gerwig, who is a kind of indie film darling. It was co-written by her and her husband, Noah Baumbach, who wrote and directed things like Marriage Story. He writes a bunch with Wes Anderson. Greta Gerwig made the recent Little Women remake, which we referenced in the last episode.
Oh, we did, didn't we?
And Lady Bird, which we also referenced in the last episode.
Didn't we?
Among other things. It stars Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling and Simu Liu and Will Ferrell and America Ferrera and a bunch of other people that who have like 2 seconds of screen time that I haven't even
A-listers.
Yeah. Can't even remember.
I think there were a lot of people vying to get into the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about Timothée Chalamet on the previous episode. If you haven't heard that episode on Dune, he was one of the people that like at one point was going to be in it.
And they said
he and Greta Gerwig have a long collaboration as well. So we'll start just with our first thoughts, and we'll start with our guest.
Yes.
But Meg, like just generally speaking, like as a viewer, did you like it? What did you think?
So, as someone whose favorite movie is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Barbie was not really my cup of tea. I would say on both occasions I streamed it and I was not paying attention to it the whole time.
Okay.
So it was one of those occasions where I already have trouble focusing on things because I'm 5 months pregnant.
Yeah.
But also, like, I just didn't. I was not locked in at any point. And that's one of the core things that we would talk to our students about is, you know, are you engaging the audience the whole time?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer was no. So in terms of like, did I like it? I would probably say no.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me feel so much better about myself. Because like this was not it was I didn't take it to be like a super artsy movie.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
It's a lot of pink. They did obviously a lot of set design, I would imagine. I also watched it and I'm like, Ryan Gosling, you know, like there he is. There's the guy. And then, you know, every now and then I'm like, that's funny. There was like an occasional funny part. The humor was good, but more often than not, I'm like, you know, reading on my Kindle and, you know, again, being the old man of being like, wait, what just happened? Can we turn the captions on? I need my captions. I can't hear them.
Yeah.
So it was the same sort of thing. I found it more entertaining. This is me. I only watched it once, and I too streamed it, and again, did my old man derp thing. But I found it more entertaining than the first time I tried to watch Dune.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mainly because there was humor and I don't know. I like humor. I don't know. Unsophisticated palate. There it is. Uncultured swine. That is me. But also like okay. Got it.
It's a movie.
The patriarchy.
It's a movie.
It's a movie. There's a lot of pink.
Yeah, I think that because I tend to think of things like in terms of directors and like kind of compare them that way as opposed to like other things that are similar. And I think it's definitely Greta Gerwig's least successful movie.
Yeah.
Which when your first two directorial movies are Little Women and Lady Bird, that's a pretty high bar as far as like successful movies. I think both of those are very phenomenal films. Yeah. And so it's not those films. I think I liked it a little bit more than both of you guys, and especially on the comedy side. Like I think that has some of the best one-liners. Of a movie in the last few years. Like they're just like great moments. But I think to your point, Megan, about like the focus thing, like I was locked in for like the first 15 minutes or so, and then everything in the real world, I was just like out. Like the minute that it gets to the real world, I was done.
Yeah.
And then it comes back and I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm back in.
Yeah.
And it just drooped really low in the middle for me.
Yeah. And that was one of the notes that I made was like, commit to a main plot. Like there's not a solid takeaway, which we can talk about later, but, she doesn't actually experience the real world. Like one of my favorite movies is Enchanted. Because it's Disney making fun of themselves, but they actually plop her in the real world and you get to experience all the bad things about the real world. In Barbie, it was a very small amount of time before she gets picked up by Mattel. Right. And then the Mattel world is not the real world. It's a fantasy insert.
Yeah.
So then she kind of shot herself in the foot there because it was like she doesn't actually do a lot in the real world.
Yeah. Right. No, I completely agree. I think that it feels like there's a lot going. The way I described it the first time that I saw it was that it felt so. Greta Gerwig has historically made very, very low budget films. Like even before she was directing her own stuff, she was writing and producing and starring in these very, very low budget
I
films.
loved Frances Ha.
Frances Ha is a great example of that. It was made on a consumer grade camera. It's black and white. It's cool. It's very low budget. It's a great film. It's usually on Netflix. Like it kind of goes off and on. I would recommend watching that. It's a very different feel and vibe. But what it felt like to me with Barbie was Greta Gerwig saying, I'm never going to get this budget again. I'm never going to get these movie stars again. I'm going to throw everything I've got. I'm going to throw every influence. You know, for me, I love Singing in the Rain, and there's like a direct Singing in the Rain homage. So I was like, I'm in. Like, this is great. But she's playing with all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she was like, I'm never going to get the chance again to really go for it in the same way where a giant movie star and a giant corporation are trusting me with a lot of money. And so I'm just going to throw everything I've got at it and see what they'll let me do. And they kind of let her do everything. And now it made $1 billion, so she'll probably get to do it again.
Yeah.
But it is very much like, to your point about like, it just doesn't feel like it ever really settles on a plot. It never really feels like it settles in on something. And I think it's because it feels a little bit like spaghetti at the wall. Like, how much can we make stick?
We're going to do as much as we possibly can.
Yep.
Yeah.
It feels like there are definitely sequences that I think really, really work.
Oh yeah, there are some that really work. It just, if I were to try to categorize it, and I'm gonna use the systematic approach that I used at the university with students, it's like, what type of story is it? An Odyssey story? Is it a woman versus nature? Is it, hero against themselves? Like, what is the actual theme? Mm-hmm. And there were about 4 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And because of that, it never really feels like it nails any one of those. It feels like there's a lot of ideas. And again, having seen Lady Bird and Little Women and some of Greta Gerwig's other movies, like it was a little frustrating for me as a viewer, because I was like, I know that if you just picked one of these, you could nail it, because you nail it in Lady Bird and you nail it in Little Women. In ways that feel natural and feel real and make us and give us characters to care about, and all of these things. And so, yeah, it's like, it's not a fault of the actors. It's not a fault of really even the writing or the direction. Maybe more the direction than anything, that it just doesn't feel like it lands any one of those points. One of those themes, though, that like really is kind of floating around in the film, and I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on this. As I was rewatching it last night, I was just kind of thinking, like, there's a lot about like, what does it mean to be human, right? Because part of the big thing is that Barbie is making her way into the real world, and ultimately at the end, like, she's kind of deciding, am I going to stay in the real world? Am I going to stay in Barbie land? What does it mean to really be a human?
Yeah.
And there's all these kind of things sprinkled throughout. And I think if I were going to nail down one theme that I think is the most successful in the movie, I think it's that one. Because Ken's story kind of plays into that. Her story kind of plays into that. But yeah, like, what does it mean to be human? What did you guys take away from that, like, in the film?
That one stuck out more, because I was focused a little bit more towards the beginning, because that's it's rolling in, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's during the credits at the end. I don't remember. But at some point, like, the theme song to the thing by Billie Eilish comes on.
Yeah.
And I'm always shocked when Billie Eilish sings, because I'm like, who is that? She's really good. And so I'm sitting here listening to the song, and I'm like, man, this girl's got a great voice. What are the words, the lyrics? I have no clue, but she's got a great voice. And then I look up the lyrics. I'm like, wow, this is weird. And then, you kind of filter the rest of the movie through Billie Eilish's song, and it's like, that's exactly what we're getting at. What does it mean to be human? So anyway, again, the movie kind of all over the place. My, again, wildly uncultured opinion, but that's definitely a theme of can plastic become real? You know, can the plastic self become a real self, or, you know, in the world of expressive individualism, can my own expression become my authentic self? It, you know, seemed like that was kind of the theme that was going for. But again, I was just kind of derping.
Yeah.
Meg, what did you take away from that?
What does it mean to be human? Is that, well, yeah, I mean, to be fair to them, they're already theologically on the right track, because the question in the song is, what was I made for?
Right.
So she's already acknowledging that she was made by someone.
Yeah.
So good on you, Billy.
Well, and that circles around to something really key in what I thought was a really key line in the film. Because really, even more than, like, it starts with, like, what does it mean to be human? And then really gets into, like, how do we define ourselves, and how do we build this self that you were talking about? And there's this moment where she's deciding whether or not she's going to stay, like, become human, or go back to Barbie land, which is an actual sentence I just said. And she's meeting with her creator, right? They have the actual creator of Barbie be a character in the film, and they're talking, and Barbie says, you know, I want to be part of the people who make meaning, not the thing being made. And I think that's such an interesting idea, in that the theme of the theme song of the movie is, like, what was I made for? Like what you're saying, theologically, like, on the right track. But also, like, kind of as a movie, kind of rejecting that in a way.
Yeah, the interaction with, I believe her name is Ruth Handler, is the creator of Barbie, which, by the way, she stole a German doll, which already existed. I'm not just going to throw that in there. Constantly stealing from the Germans, as we do.
Just don't steal their theology.
We don't acknowledge it. Yeah, it was kind of that sense that we're gonna bring the divine down and become it. So ultimately, you know, first of all, I don't know how she becomes human. Like, what is that? This is not. Do you guys remember the movie Life Size with Tyra Banks?
Yeah.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
I was like, that's the OG Barbie movie.
That is the OG Barbie
really
movie. Yeah. Dang. Deep cuts.
But I don't know that it ever fully explored what humanity was. We have that lovely monologue that America Ferrera delivers about what it means to be a woman. And I believe she actually uses the term cognitive dissonance, which I was really excited about. So I was like, yes, so true. A lot of truths in that monologue about, being a woman and how difficult it is. But it didn't actually I don't think the movie developed an actual answer to that question. Yeah. And usually that's when you know the story is over, is when the main character learns the answer to their question, or they learn their lesson. And so I can give you an answer of what it means to be human, but in terms of the movie, I don't think they actually answered that. And that's why it didn't have a big impact on me.
No, I completely agree. No, the way that I put it was that it gives a really good diagnosis. It gives a really good diagnosis with no antidote. So what it does, just to kind of give us a track of where we are, like, she comes back to Barbie Land and discovers that Ken has created this patriarchy, right? Like, he comes to the real world, because in Barbie Land, everything is run by the Barbies, run by women. He comes to the real world, discovers patriarchy exists, and comes back in, which people do not give enough credit for the satire that this movie does on dudes being dudes.
Yes, because he doesn't actually experience the patriarchy.
Not at all.
At any point.
Not at all. But and I think that's so key, is that he doesn't actually create a real manhood. He creates a facsimile of manhood. But what happens is Barbie realizes that she's been putting all of her worth and all of her kind of who she is based in, like, what she's done, right? Like, she has to be perfect. And so that is stereotypical Barbie. That's who she is. And the President Barbie has put all of her worth in being President Barbie, and so on and so forth. But then Ken comes in, and so she ends up falling apart and becoming Depression Barbie, which is one of the funniest little sequences in the film.
That's right.
Yes.
Depression Barbie.
And then, but Ken, on the other hand, creates this facsimile of manhood without actually becoming a man. And he ends up with this very empty, fake manhood of the Mojo Dojo Casa House. And so you've got but then what happens to both of them is they come to the end of themselves, right?
Yeah.
They come to, and this is what you were saying as far as like giving us like a picture of what it means, the complexity, the cognitive dissonance of what it really means to be human, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, where, and at one point Barbie says, well, maybe all the things that you thought made you aren't you. And so rather than putting your stock in all of these things, these external things, and saying, well, these are me, what you should be doing is actually like being yourself. But I think that to your point, it gets that right? Like that all of these things that we build up around ourselves, whether they're, an image that we're trying to project out into the world, or it's things that we do, our accomplishments, our achievements, and even good things, right? Like it's a great thing to become president. That's awesome. It's a great thing to ride horses. That's great. All of these things that we build up around ourselves. And again, and even the very fact of being a man or being a woman, those are great things in and of themselves. But when you put all of your value in that, like what Ken does, where he's like, I'm going to put all my value in being a man, or what Barbie does, I'm going to put all of my value in being perfect, and this is who I am. Ultimately, you come to the end of yourself. And I think what the movie doesn't do a good job at, to your point, is what do you do when you actually come to the end of yourself?
Yeah.
And because Barbie tries to give this answer of I'm gonna do the imagining, not the thing being, not the idea. I'm gonna be the I'm gonna be the person
the creator.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the creator, not the created. And I think all that's gonna do is start a cycle over, right?
I would imagine so, and I think there's also an interesting element in this movie that, I mean, unless you're eagle-eyed and can pick up on this, they had a trans performer as one of the Barbies in it. But at the end of the movie, Barbie becoming real, quote unquote, she makes a gynecological appointment.
Yeah.
So her becoming a real woman means that she has the attributes of a real woman.
Yeah.
But they have
nice
a man playing.
Good job, guys. Yeah, like especially on that, this is kind of one of my pet peeves about a lot of, like, not even just movies, but probably more so books of nonfiction and theological works of they present, because that's, I'm more comfortable in that world, but they present, here's our problem, and they never give a solution. So we always just get, law. Here is why you all are terrible, X, Y, and Z. And everybody's looking around going, yep, I feel that all the time, man. Good job. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. But then they never really give like decent solutions other than like try harder. There's a guy who wrote a great book and is a good dude. I can't stand the way he writes. T. David Gordon, he probably will never listen to it. I appreciate you. You're a good brother. Your book, Why Johnny Can't Preach, like irked me so hard the first time I read it, because it's like, here's why none of you can preach, and you all are like the worst, most garbage preachers the world has ever seen. It's because you can't read and write, and we're all illiterately sitting there going, I don't know what you just said because I can't read and write, but also we know. Thanks. You don't think I feel that every single week after I like walk out of the pulpit being like, that was terrible. Of course I know that. But there's never any like reprieve. And so the movie in a similar way kind of felt the same of like, nobody knows really what they're made for. So like go and figure it out. And it's like, well, that's not helpful. Like, that's just another law.
But it is it's very current to our climate. In that,
totally.
Like, you see people defining themselves by their disabilities or their self-diagnosed ones more often than not.
Yeah.
And then it ends there. It's not, I'm going to go get treatment for this.
Yeah.
It's, this is who I am.
That's right.
I am my
Yeah.
80,000 things that
And that's kind of leads us into the next kind of section, but like thinking about like, why is this movie successful now? Why in this moment? And why did it capture the zeitgeist in such a way? And I think that it did this very, very unique thing of capturing something that's very entertaining with some of the biggest movie stars on the planet who are incredibly engaging, who are incredibly funny, letting them do their thing. Well, also hitting at this very core idea of, what are we all trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out what we're made for. We're trying to figure out what's going on inside, and also just telling us what we want to hear at the end of it, and saying, yeah, no, you know what you got to do? You got to create yourself. And rather than creating yourself with all of these outward things, you create yourself by just being you. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Oh. And I think that there's a sense in which that's a good thing to say, don't create yourself with all of these outward things. But what it doesn't do, again, like it's a diagnosis without an antidote.
Yeah.
It's saying, go and be yourself.
Yeah.
Without giving us any sense to like actually solve the thing that got us here in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And especially working with students, it's one thing that I've found with them, like, watching kids get wrecked. Tell me about yourself. I play football. Okay. Like, what about football? Like, tell me more. Oh, I do this. I go to every camp, blah, 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 blah. Fantastic. I'm going to be a D1 athlete. I'm going to the NFL. I am football. That's awesome. Blows ACL, never plays again. Okay, who are you now? Yeah. I'm nobody. Or I am a straight A student. Well, that's great. I'm glad. That's good. Good job. Gets a B, wrecked. Right?
And what do you do when you're not a student anymore?
That's right. Like full breakdown.
Yeah. Like just lost. And so, there's a point where it's like, okay, that's good. Yeah, I appreciate that. But what have you actually solved? What have you fixed? And it misses the point. But it for lack of a better term, it preached because it made $1 billion with a B. With a B. So people, I think, are feeling that, and it, like even somewhat of the, the current climate of, seeing the shift from like Gen X, boomers, Gen X, and now millennials and Gen Z of, I don't want to be my career. Career should be a thing, hopefully, that I enjoy. Well, that's great. Should be fulfilling, tremendous. But it shouldn't be who I am. I should be something more than just what I, do from 9 to 5 or whenever else. And again, helpful, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. I think it was also riding on the whole future is female movement, which is still alive and kicking. And now, I mean, part of it
is you put your hand on your stomach.
Well, I'm saying that because there was a really disturbing, and I love Dame Helen Mirren so much, but when she does the voiceover at the beginning that mimics 2001: A Space Odyssey opening, stuff, there's this very visceral moment where the baby dolls are getting smashed, and there's offhand comments about baby dolls are not fun to play with. Ask your mom or ask your mother, I think she says.
Oh. Eventually, you
get sick of playing with babies.
With the babies,
and they're literally smashing these baby dolls. And then, of course, they say they discontinued Pregnant Madge, I think, because it was too uncomfortable.
Pregnant dolls just didn't sell.
Yeah, they didn't sell. And here I am, pregnant, watching this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but that's one of the things that defines womanhood. So if we're doing this whole like hyper, and I don't know what wave of feminism this falls into, because there's so many now. We're on like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a good point to bring up in the movie. In any case, that they're throwing out something that is unique to womanhood. And they're saying this no longer is part of how we see women and the women become their careers.
Yeah.
But there was something a little bit disturbing about that.
Yeah.
Too, because now we're in, the era of, well, have you guys been keeping up with what's happening over in England with policies on women's safe spaces and stuff with the trans movement? Anyway, it's very interesting, but they're kind of tearing each other apart now because, women are saying we need to define women as women so that we can have spaces where only women are allowed, because if you don't, then men can go in any of them. And here we have a movie that's very, very pro some sort of feminism, I think, maybe. It's also very tongue-in-cheek, so you could also make an argument that it's not super feminist.
Well, I think that what's so funny about the movie is that a lot of the culture war around Barbie was like, either it's too quote-unquote woke for the kids and all of this, and should the kids watch it and all this. But when you watch it, it's very like classically like a 1980s feminist style thing, right? Like it's not trying to, there was nothing said in the movie that I was like shocked by, that I hadn't heard before, whether or not I agreed with it or not. It's like, it wasn't like this groundbreaking progressive thing. And so it's very interesting, to your point, is that it's not trying to break ground, right? Like it's not. And so but in that, it almost becomes like a point to say, like, actually it's kind of supporting a very traditional idea of what it means, because at the end of the day, it's not really supporting this hyper feminist idea that you are your own woman and you don't need anybody else, and I'm going to be my career and pull myself up by my bootstraps. But it's also not really supporting a kind of anti like masculinity argument, right? Because the masculinity that it paints of Ken is like this very empty masculinity. And it is against that. And I think that all three of us here would be like, yeah, we're against that kind of empty facsimile of something. And I think that that's what it's doing. So it's very interesting in that it is not nearly as progressive, I think, as maybe it wants to be.
Well, yeah, and I think you hit it on the nose. What I was looking at is the aftermath of people not getting that.
Yeah.
And taking it as we're going to make this our movement movie. And all these women went to go see it and take their kids and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, if you actually watch it, they don't actually draw that conclusion. Yeah. But boy, did I see a lot of posts and things like that. And I'm not personally on social media, but I was watching news and reporting and how many people saw it. And I had former students who were talking about like, this movie is so great because pro women and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, that's probably why it made a lot of money.
Yeah. But it's so interesting because at the end of the day, like, I think it's pro women, but I think it's also just like pro people. Like it's pro getting to the root of the human condition.
Yeah.
Whether or not it does that well is certainly up for discussion.
Also, it was like one of two movies in the theater.
Well, that's also true. That or Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And so why not both?
Yeah. Why not both? Don't take your kids to Oppenheimer.
Yeah, don't do it.
I wouldn't recommend that.
Yes, no, don't. But good movie. But don't take your kids to that.
So I think that brings us to like when we think about it, everyone's seeing this movie.
Yeah.
It has this kind of cultural impact, and we've said it's a diagnosis without an antidote. It's hitting at something that is obviously very real, but it doesn't really have an answer. Where do we find our answer? Pastor Keaton, I'll turn to you first.
Oh, man. Well, one, like just going back to, what they're longing for is true inherent dignity, right? Like that's really what they're searching for. What is it? Who am I? What was I made for? And, when just Christians have the answer, and it's very simple. It's the first question in our catechism. What's your chief end? It's to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Every single day with students, that's how we kick it off. I tell them if you get hit by a bus and you can't remember your name, that's honestly fine because that's kind of irrelevant. Here's what you need to remember. Your chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And if you've got that, then you've got the answer everybody's looking for, right? What's Greta looking for? We're on first name basis. What's she looking for? She's really looking for the answer to that question. What is my chief end? Really, your chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. You were made in his image, even if you don't recognize that. You don't have to create an identity for yourself. It's already been stamped, and it's a way better identity than you could ever hope for. It's just, here it is. You are set apart from the rest of creation. You are made in the image of the infinite, eternal, and triune God. And so glorify and enjoy him in all that you do and say and think and create or make. Yeah. But anyway. Yeah.
Meagen, your thoughts?
Oh, can I just say yes? Yeah. So the real ending to this movie should have been Barbie getting baptized, right?
Oh,
that would have been
yes.
Right.
That would have been something. Yeah, I think
Heads would have rolled in so many different ways.
I think the other thing that that I was thinking about, because the moment of when she's holding hands with Ruth right before she decides to become a human, and she says that thing about like, I want to do the imagining and not just be the idea. I want to be the thing that is making meaning, not the thing that's being made. And I think what's so revealing about that is that in Christ, because we're given that identity, there's a lot of freedom in that I think people, if you view the Bible, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. One of my pet peeves is viewing the Bible as like a rule book. And it's like, well, these are the do's and do nots. And there are obviously do's and do nots in there. But if you view that as what it means to be in Christ, what you were saying about like when someone gives you a book and like all you get is law out of it.
Yeah.
If that's what you view what it means to be in Christ, well then, yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Not good news.
It's not good news. And so, yeah, that is limiting. And so when you view that as like, well, what it means to be a creative being means that I just follow all these rules that this creator up here set out for me. I think that even in that conversation, Barbie says something to Ruth about like, well, don't you get to tell me what to do because you created me? And Ruth says, well, no, but you're so much more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, again, so revealing of like, that's how we view God in so many ways. Is like, well, you created me. Now you're just going to tell me what to do. Like if I believe in, if I submit to the idea that I have a creator and I'm going to glorify God and enjoy him forever, whatever that means, then like now you're just going to give me a list of do's and do nots and that's how I've got to do it. As opposed to, and this is one of the things we've talked about before that I love about the Westminster Confession and Catechism as a whole, all of the answers are so broad.
You're right.
What does it mean to glorify God and enjoy him forever?
Yep.
Well, that could mean any number of things. Keaton's a pastor. Meg and I make movies of all things and write stories.
And you're Christians?
And we're Christians. When you're in Christ and you're actually doing all these things, the answers are so broad.
Yeah.
And so the idea of like what it means to glorify God and enjoy him forever can mean almost anything.
Yeah.
Like there's some things that it definitely doesn't mean.
Right.
There's some limitations there, obviously.
Yeah.
But I would argue that the thing, when you're actually doing what you were made to be doing, you are way more free than you are if you're trying to do the thing that you're not meant to do. I had a Bible teacher put it this way, right? He drew a bunch of boxes on the board, and he wrote dog, cat, and bird, and then he was like, so here's the thing: a dog can do anything within this box. He can't meow because that's what a cat does. But he's free to do whatever a dog can do.
Yeah.
within his limitations. And that's how we are too, right? Like when we are put inside that box, which, let's be clear, we're in the box regardless.
Yeah, that's right.
Like there's only so much we can do as human beings already.
Yeah.
But when we recognize the borders around us and we actually do the thing that we were actually created to do, we're actually way more free than if we're up at the edge of the box trying to knock down the wall.
That's right.
Because the thing that we want to meow and it's on the other side of that wall and we can't get to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that like that's true rest, right? And so what I said earlier about like this cycle restarting, right? Like Barbie has spent all of this time trying to become stereotypical Barbie and maintain that image.
Yeah.
And where does it get her? Depressed. And so now she's going to be she's going to be a human.
Yeah.
And she's going to create meaning.
Yeah.
All that's going to happen is she's going to end up being a depressed human Barbie instead of a depressed plastic Barbie.
Yeah.
So,
roll credits.
So yeah, I think that's the answer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where we go.
That's right.
Like,
yeah, that's right. Find your identity in Christ.
Yeah. That's what it means to be human. That's what
right.
it means to have worth. That's what it means to have value.
That's right.
Is ultimately finding ourself in him.
Yep. That's right.
I forget,
Amen.
What is that quote? C.S. Lewis wrote it into one of his stories, but it's like, take comfort in your smallness, I think. It's that you aren't the creator, and thank God we're not.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's not dependent on us.
I'm fine with that.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of preach.
It will preach. Meagen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Being a part of this.
It's fantastic.
Next week, we will be discussing Knives Out. Good old whodunit.
That's right.
So, we'll see you then.
See you then.